Some silences are louder than any words ever spoken. For 40 years, Tamsin Rourke carried the weight of her mother walking out the door and never looking back. Now at 62, she learned Velda had only weeks left to live. Tamsin spent her last $200 on a broken-down cabin by an alpine lake in Montana's mountains. Everyone said the place should have been torn down, but Tamsin needed somewhere the past could finally be faced. The cabin's floors were rotting, and its walls were barely standing. What she found hidden beneath those old boards changed everything she thought she knew about her mother and their family. Could two women find peace after decades of hurt? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning came to the Bitterroot Mountains the way it always did, slow and deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. Tamsin Rourke stood in her barn before sunrise, running her hand along the worn leather bridle that hung on the same peg it had occupied for 30 years. The leather was soft from handling, dark with age, and the oils from countless hands. Her father's hands first, then hers. The bridle had outlasted him by a decade. She wrapped her fingers around the headstool and felt the familiar weight of it. This was the life she'd chosen after her mother left. Horses didn't ask complicated questions. They didn't walk out in the middle of the night with a single suitcase and no explanation. They stayed if you fed them and treated them right. Simple as that. The barn smelled of hay and leather and horse sweat. Good, honest smells. She'd been up since 4, the way she was every day, feeding the 7 horses she kept for training. Most belonged to people from Missoula or Hamilton, who paid her to gentle their animals or break bad habits formed by impatient handling. She had a reputation in these mountains, reliable, fair, distant but never cruel. The youngest horse, a 3-year-old mare named Dancer, nickered from her stall. Tamsin moved down the aisle and ran her palm along the mare's neck. The horse leaned into the touch, trusting. "You're coming along," Tamsin said quietly. The mare had been head-shy when she'd arrived 3 months ago, flinching at any hand that came near her face. Now she stood calm, eyes soft. Small victories. That's what this life was built on. She heard the truck before she saw it. Doc Henshaw's ancient Ford pickup rattling up the gravel drive. He was the only person who came by with any regularity, mostly because his veterinary practice required it. But somewhere in the past 15 years, the professional visits had turned into something closer to friendship. Not that either of them would call it that out loud. Tamsin walked out into the yard. The sun was just starting to touch the peaks to the east, turning them gold. Doc climbed out of his truck, a thermos in one hand and his medical bag in the other. He was 73, wiry and weathered, with kind eyes that missed nothing. "Coffee?" he offered, holding up the thermos. "Already had mine." She nodded toward the barn. "Dancer's ready for her checkup whenever you are. I'll look at her in a minute." He leaned against the truck bed, studying her. "You sleep at all last night?" "Enough." "That's not an answer," Tamsin sighed. This was the problem with people who'd known you too long. They saw through the walls you built. Doc had been her father's friend first, back when her father was alive, and this ranch ran more than 7 horses. Back when it had been a real operation, not just the bare bones of one. "I've got things on my mind," she admitted. "Figured as much. You've been chewing on something for 3 days now." He poured himself a cup of coffee from the thermos, even though he'd probably already had 2 pots worth. "You want to talk about it, or you want me to pretend I don't notice?" Before she could answer, another vehicle came up the drive. Jesse's old Subaru, held together mostly by optimism and duct tape. The girl was 24, sturdy and strong, with blonde hair usually tied back in a practical braid. She'd been working at the ranch part-time for 2 years, showing up 3 days a week to help with the heavy work Tamsin's aging body resisted more each season. Jessie parked and hopped out, already pulling on her work gloves. "Morning, Tamsin." "Morning, Doc. I can start mucking stalls if you want." "Give me a few minutes first," Tamsin said. "Need to talk to both of you." That got their attention. Tamsin wasn't one for talks. She gave instructions, answered questions when asked, and kept most everything else locked up tight. They followed her to the porch, where 3 chairs sat in a row facing the mountains. Tamsin had added the extra chairs years ago, though she couldn't have said why. Maybe hoping someone would sit in them. Doc and Jessie took their seats waiting. Got a phone call 3 days ago, Tamsin began. From a hospice nurse in Missoula. Doc set down his coffee cup carefully. My mother's there, Velda. She's dying. Cancer. They're saying weeks, maybe less. Jessie's eyes went wide. I didn't know you. I didn't know she was still alive. Neither did I, really. Haven't spoken to her in 40 years. Tamsin kept her voice level, factual. Easier that way. She left when I was 22. Just up and walked out one night. My father never got over it. Died 10 years ago, still wondering why. Doc nodded slowly. He'd been there for that, too. Had helped make arrangements when her father passed, his heart finally giving out from a lifetime of work and grief compounded. The nurse said Velda's been asking for me. Wants to see me before... Tamsin stopped, reorganized her thoughts. Before she goes, are you going to go? Jessie asked gently. I went yesterday. The admission hung in the air. Doc raised his eyebrows but didn't interrupt. Drove to Missoula. Saw her, she looks... Tamsin searched for the word. Small. She was always small, I suppose, but now she's just fading. But her mind's sharp. Sharp as ever. How did it go? Doc asked. Strange, awkward. 40 years is a long time to leave things unsaid. Tamsin pulled her jacket tighter, even though the morning wasn't particularly cold. We talked, sort of. Danced around the real things. She asked about the ranch, about my life. I asked about hers. Turns out she's been living in Butte for the past 20 years. Working checkout at a grocery store. Living alone. And? Doc prompted, and I did something probably foolish. Tamsin pulled a folded paper from her pocket. A printed listing she'd found online 3 nights ago when she couldn't sleep. There's a cabin for sale. $200. Up by Alpine Lake, about 40 minutes from here. It's condemned. Barely standing. But it's got 4 walls and a roof of sorts. She handed the paper to Doc. He studied it, then looked at her like she might have lost her mind. You bought a condemned cabin. I did. For $200. It was all I had left in my account after paying this month's feed bill. Tamsin, I know how it sounds. She stood, needing to move. But I told Velda I'd bring her there. Instead of dying in that hospice facility, I told her she could die in the mountains, where the air is clean and the view is something worth looking at. And she said yes. Jessie looked between them, trying to understand. You're bringing your dying mother, who you haven't seen in 40 years, to a condemned cabin in the mountains. That's about the size of it. Why? Doc asked. Not judging, just genuinely wanting to understand. Tamsin was quiet for a long moment, watching the lights spread across the valley below. Because 40 years ago, she walked out that door and I never got to ask her why. And now she's dying. And if I don't do this, if I just let her die in that sterile room in Missoula, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering. Just like my father did. You think a few weeks in a cabin is going to give you answers? Doc's voice was gentle. I think it's going to give us time. That's all. Just time. Away from... She gestured vaguely. Everything. Just her and me and whatever truth we can manage to tell each other before she's gone. Doc stood and put a hand on her shoulder. You're going to need help getting that place even remotely livable. I know. And someone needs to run this ranch while you're up there. I know that too. She looked at Jessie. I'm going to need you full-time for a while. If you can manage it. I can't pay you extra, but I'll do it, Jessie said immediately. Whatever you need. The hospice is sending a nurse to check on her twice a week, Tamsin continued, and I'll have my phone. But mostly it'll just be us, me and Velda, in a cabin that should probably be torn down. When are you bringing her up? Doc asked. Tomorrow. That's soon. She doesn't have time to waste. Neither do I. Tamsin picked up the paper with the cabin listing and folded it back into her pocket. I signed the papers yesterday afternoon. It's mine now, ours, for whatever that's worth. Doc studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll stop by the cabin tomorrow evening. Check on you both. Make sure the place hasn't fallen down around your ears. Appreciate it. And Tamsin? He waited until she met his eyes. I knew your father. He was a good man who spent 40 years stuck in the past, wondering about a woman who left. Don't let that be you two. Whatever answers you get or don't get up there, you make your peace with it and move forward. You hear me? I hear you. After they left, Doc to check on dancer, Jessie to start the day's work, Tamsin stood alone on the porch. She looked at the barn, at the pastures beyond, at the mountains rising in every direction. This was home, the only real home she'd ever known. Her father had built it from nothing, and she'd kept it going after he passed, even as. It shrank year by year, but somewhere in the back of her mind, in the place she rarely let herself examine, she knew Doc was right. She'd built the same prison her father had. Let the past define every choice, every relationship, every possibility. Kept herself so guarded that nothing and no one could get close enough to leave. 40 years of protecting herself from becoming her mother, and what had it gotten her? A barn full of other people's horses, a bank account that barely scraped by, a life that was safe and predictable and small. She thought about Velda in that hospice bed, her body failing but her eyes still sharp. Thought about the careful way they'd circled each other in conversation, both afraid to push too hard, to ask the real questions. Why did you leave? Did you ever love us? Did you ever regret it? Those questions had sat in Tamsin's throat for 4 decades. Maybe in a cabin by an alpine lake, with nothing but time and truth between them, she'd finally find the courage to ask. She went back into the barn, back to the work that never ended. But as she ran her hand along that old leather bridle one more time, she made herself a promise. Whatever happened in that cabin, whatever she learned or didn't learn, she wouldn't spend the next 40 years of her life frozen in place. Her father had died. Still waiting for answers. Tamsin Rourke was done waiting. The drive to Missoula took 3 hours through winding mountain roads that Tamsin knew by heart. She'd loaded the truck bed with supplies, sleeping bags, a camping stove, basic food, bottled water, cleaning supplies. Enough to make the condemned cabin barely functional for a dying woman. The hospice facility sat on the east side of town, a low brick building trying hard to look welcoming. Tamsin had called ahead. The staff knew she was coming to take Velda away, and while they'd expressed concerns about the plan, they couldn't legally stop a patient from leaving if she was competent and willing. Tamsin found her mother sitting in a wheelchair by the window of her room, dressed in regular clothes instead of a hospital gown. Someone had helped her. Her hair was combed, thin and white. She'd been a redhead once, like Tamsin. That had faded decades ago. You came back, Velda said. Her voice was steady despite the oxygen tube in her nose. Said I would. People say a lot of things. Tamsin let that land without responding. A nurse came in with discharge papers and instructions. Medications for pain. Warnings about what to watch for. Emergency numbers to call. Velda would need help with most everything now. Walking, bathing, eating. Her body was shutting down in stages, the cancer having spread too far for any intervention beyond comfort. You sure about this? The nurse asked Tamsin quietly while Velda signed forms with a shaking hand. No, but I'm doing it anyway. The nurse nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe she'd seen enough dying to know that people needed more than clean sheets and scheduled medications. They needed something that felt like choice, like dignity, like coming home, even if home wasn't what it used to be. Getting Velda into the truck took time and care. She weighed almost nothing, her body hollowed out by disease. Tamsin settled her into the passenger seat with pillows for support and made sure the seatbelt wasn't pressing on anywhere that hurt. "Ready?" Tamsin asked. "As I'll ever be." They drove in silence for the first hour. Tamsin focused on the road, on the familiar rhythm of shifting gears on the mountain curves. Velda stared out the window, watching the landscape change from town to forest to high alpine terrain. Finally, Velda spoke. "Your father." "How did he die?" "Heart attack, in the barn. Found him in the morning when I came to feed." Tamsin kept her eyes forward. "It was quick," they said. "Probably didn't suffer much. Was he—" Velda started again. "Was he happy?" "In his life." Tamsin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You'd have to ask him that. But he's not here to answer." "That's answer enough, I suppose." They fell back into silence. 10 miles later, Tamsin turned onto a smaller road that climbed steeply. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to dirt rutted with erosion. The truck bounced and jostled. Velda gripped the door handle but didn't complain. "Not much farther," Tamsin said. The road ended at a small clearing. Beyond it, a rope bridge stretched across a narrow ravine. On the other side, barely visible through the trees, sat the cabin. Even from a distance, Tamsin could see why it had sold for $200. The roof sagged in the middle. One window was broken, covered with what looked like old cardboard. The porch listed to one side, like it might collapse under a strong wind. "That's it?" Velda asked. "That's it. You spent $200 on that." "I did," Velda laughed, a sound that turned into coughing. When she recovered, she shook her head. "Well, I've seen worse. Have you? I lived in a trailer park in Butte for 15 years, trust me. I've seen worse." Tamsin helped her mother out of the truck. Velda stood unsteady, leaning heavily on Tamsin's arm. Together they approached the rope bridge. It was old, but had been recently inspected according to the county records. Still, it swayed under their combined weight as they crossed slowly, one careful step at a time. Velda stopped halfway across and looked down. The ravine dropped 30 feet to a creek below. "If this breaks, we're both done for. Then let's not let it break." They made it to the other side. Tamsin unlocked the cabin door. The realtor had left a key in an obvious hiding spot under a rock and pushed it open. The smell hit first. Mildew and rot and years of abandonment. But behind that, something else. The sharp, clean scent of pine from the trees pressing close, the mineral smell of lake water not far beyond. Inside, the cabin was worse than the photos suggested. The floor was warped and soft in places. Water damage marked the walls and ceiling. There was electricity. Tamsin had paid to have it turned on, but only 3 of the light fixtures worked. The kitchen sink was stained and ancient. The bathroom was barely functional, but there was also a stone fireplace that looked solid. Windows on 3 sides that would let in good light once she cleaned them. And when Tamsin opened the back door, there it was, the lake. Alpine blue and perfectly still, surrounded by mountains that seemed to hold it like cupped hands. "Oh," Velda said softly, standing in the doorway. "Oh, that's something." Tamsin looked at her mother's face and saw something she didn't expect. Peace. Just for a moment. But it was there. "Let's get you settled," Tamsin said. She'd brought air mattresses and set them up in the main room, which seemed the most structurally sound. Made up Velda's bed with clean sheets and the extra pillows from the hospice. Set up the camping stove in the kitchen. Filled a basin with water from bottles she'd brought for washing. Velda sat in the cabin's only chair, a wooden rocker that surprisingly seemed sturdy, and watched Tamsin work. "You didn't have to do this. Had to do something. You could have just left me there. In Missoula. Let me die the regular way." Tamsin stopped unpacking and looked at her mother. Really looked. The woman in that chair was a stranger in so many ways. Lines and age and decades of separate living had made her unfamiliar. But her eyes, those were still the eyes Tamsin remembered from childhood. Gray-blue like winter sky. "I couldn't do that," Tamsin said. "Why not?" The question hung there, demanding honesty. Tamsin sat down on the floor, her back against the wall. "Because I have questions, and you're the only one with answers. And when you're gone, those answers go with you. What if my answers aren't what you want to hear? Then at least I'll know. That's more than my father ever got." Velda rocked slowly, the chair creaking. "He was a good man." "He was. I hurt him terribly." "Yes, I hurt you terribly too." Tamsin didn't respond. What was there to say? They both knew the truth of it. "I'm not going to apologize," Velda continued. "Not yet. Because an apology without explanation is just words, and we've had 40 years of nothing but words unsaid. So if we're going to do this, if we're going to spend whatever time I have left in this falling-down cabin, we should do it right. The truth, all of it. Even the ugly parts, especially the ugly parts," Tamsin said. "Fair enough." Velda turned her face toward the window, toward the lake beyond. "This place, you just found it online? County auction listing. It's been condemned for years. No one wanted it, and yet you brought me here. Seemed right somehow." Velda's expression changed. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or memory. But when Tamsin leaned forward to ask, her mother had already turned away. That moment closed. That night they ate simple food heated on the camping stove. Velda managed half a bowl of soup before exhaustion overtook her. Tamsin helped her to bed, gave her the pain medication on schedule, and made sure she was comfortable. "Thank you," Velda murmured, already half asleep. "For what?" "For not leaving me to die alone." Tamsin sat on her own air mattress across the room and listened to her mother's breathing even out into sleep. Through the cleaned front window, moonlight reflected off the lake. The cabin creaked and settled around them, a structure holding together through habit more than integrity. She thought about the rope bridge they'd crossed to get here, how it had swayed under their weight, both of them trusting it would hold. This cabin, this time together, it was another kind of bridge, one they'd been avoiding for 40 years. And now here they were, crossing it step by careful step, with no certainty about what waited on the other side. Only the crossing itself, and the hope that they'd both make it across before time ran out. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of pine. Tamsin woke early out of habit, her body clock still set to ranch hours. Velda was still sleeping, her breathing shallow but steady. The morning light through the cabin windows showed the place in harsh clarity. Every water stain, every warped board, every sign of neglect. Tamsin made coffee on the camping stove and took it outside to the porch. The boards creaked under her weight but held. From here, she could see the full expanse of the lake, mist rising off its surface as the air warmed. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest tight, remote, untouched. The kind of place you came to when you needed the world to fall away. She spent the morning working on basic repairs. The roof needed attention where water had gotten in. She patched what she could with materials brought from the ranch, found a broom, and swept decades of dirt and pine needles from the corners, cleaned the windows until light poured through clear and bright. Around noon, Doc Henshaw's truck appeared across the ravine. He crossed the rope bridge with the casual confidence of someone who'd lived in these mountains his whole life, carrying a box of supplies. "Brought food," he said. "Real food, not just canned soup. And medical supplies. The hospice nurse won't be out until tomorrow, so I figured I'd check in." "Appreciate it." They went inside together. Velda was awake, sitting in the rocking chair and looking stronger than she had the day before. Or maybe just more settled. Doc introduced himself with easy courtesy, and Velda responded with surprising warmth. "You're the veterinarian," she said. "That's right. Known Tamsin since she was about 14. Her father and I were friends." Something passed over Velda's face at the mention of her husband, but she didn't look away. "Then you knew him well." "Well enough. Was he happy after I left?" The directness of the question seemed to surprise Doc, but he didn't dodge it. "No, ma'am. Can't say he was. But he was a good father to Tamsin. Made sure she had what she needed. Taught her everything he knew about horses and land and hard work." Velda nodded slowly. "That's something at least." While Doc checked Velda's vital signs and medications, Tamsin explored the cabin more thoroughly. Under the kitchen sink, behind old rags and a rusted coffee can, she found a metal toolbox. She pulled it out and opened it. Inside were old tools, screwdrivers, pliers, a small hammer. Beneath them, folded paper. She unfolded it carefully. A property deed yellowed with age. The cabin and surrounding 5 acres had been deeded to someone named Lily Meredith in 1952. There were other papers, too. Tax records. A handwritten note about well water quality from 1955. "Find something interesting?" Doc asked, coming to look over her shoulder. "Old property deed. From before we bought it, obviously. County must have reclaimed it at some point for unpaid taxes." She showed him the name. "Lily Meredith. Mean anything to you?" "Can't say it does. But 1952 was a long time ago." Tamsin looked over at Velda, who'd gone quiet. "You ever heard that name?" "Lily Meredith?" Her mother's hands gripped the arms of the rocking chair. For just a second her face went completely blank. Then she shook her head. "No, don't think so. It was a lie." Tamsin was certain of it. But before she could push, Doc was already saying goodbye, promising to check in again in a few days. She walked him to the bridge. "Your mother's failing fast," he said quietly. "You can see it in her color, in the way she moves. The nurse will confirm it tomorrow, but I'd say you're looking at days, maybe 2 weeks if you're fortunate. I know. Are you getting what you need from this? Being up here with her? Don't know yet. We're still circling. Neither of us quite ready to land on the truth. Well, don't wait too long. Time's not on your side. After he left, Tamsin went back inside. Velda was still in the chair, staring at nothing. The toolbox and deed were on the counter where Tamsin had left them. You do know that name, Tamsin said. Not a question. Velda didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, leave it alone. Why? Because it's old history. Dead and buried. This cabin isn't dead and buried. It's standing right here. And you're in it. And when I said that name, you looked like you'd seen a ghost. Maybe I did. Velda's voice was sharp now, defensive. Maybe some ghosts should stay buried, Tamsin wanted to push, but something in her mother's face stopped her. Fear maybe, or pain. Whatever it was, it went deeper than Tamsin's questions could reach in one afternoon. All right, she said. We'll leave it for now. The tension eased slightly. Velda's shoulders dropped. I need to rest. Tamsin helped her to the air mattress and made sure she was comfortable. Once Velda's eyes closed, Tamsin went back outside with the deed. She sat on the porch steps and read through all the papers more carefully. Lily Meredith had owned this cabin and the land around it, had paid taxes on it faithfully until 1997, when the payments stopped. The county had eventually reclaimed it for unpaid back taxes in 2003. It had sat empty since then, slowly deteriorating, 26 years between the last tax payment and the county reclamation. That wasn't just forgetting to pay. That was someone dying, and no one claiming the property after. Tamsin pulled out her phone. She had minimal signal up here, but enough. She searched for Lily Meredith, Montana, 1997. After several tries with different search terms, she found it. An obituary from the Missoulian. Lily Jane Meredith, age 67, died peacefully at her home in Seattle on November 3, 1997. Born in Billings, Montana, Lily was a beloved teacher who dedicated 40 years to education. She never married, but was cherished by countless students and friends. She maintained a family cabin in Montana throughout her life and requested her ashes be scattered there. Services were held at. Tamsin stopped reading, looked up at the cabin. Back at the obituary, this was Lily's cabin. The woman had died 28 years ago and asked to have her ashes scattered here, which meant this place had mattered to her, had meant something deep and significant enough that she wanted her final remains connected to it, and Velda knew the name. Had reacted to it like a wound reopened. Tamsin looked through the cabin window at her sleeping mother. 40 years of silence. 40 years of questions without answers. And now, in a cabin that belonged to a dead woman her mother claimed not to know, more mysteries were layering on top of old ones. She thought about what Doc had said. Time wasn't on their side. If Velda had secrets about this place, about Lily Meredith, about why she'd agreed so readily to come here, those secrets needed to surface soon, because in a week, maybe 2, her mother would be gone. And all those secrets would die with her. Tamsin folded the deed carefully and put it in her pocket. Tonight, when Velda was awake and clear-headed, they'd talk. Really talk. No more dancing around the edges. She'd brought her mother here for truth. And truth was what she intended to get. The hospice nurse came the next morning, a woman named Karen with competent hands and kind eyes. She checked Velda thoroughly, adjusted medication dosages, and confirmed what Doc had said. 2 weeks, maybe less. The cancer was aggressive and had spread everywhere. Velda's body was shutting down in stages. After Karen left, Tamsin cleaned out more of the cabin. She was working through the kitchen drawers, throwing away mouse-damaged towels and rusted utensils, when her hand closed on something at the very back of the lowest drawer. A photograph. She pulled it out and wiped the dust away. Black and white, edges scalloped the way old photos were. A woman stood in front of this very cabin, younger, in better repair, but unmistakable. The woman was maybe 30, dark hair curled in the style of the 1950s. She wore trousers and a white shirt, sleeves rolled up. Her smile was genuine, her eyes bright. On the back, in faded ink, "Some promises are worth keeping, LMLM Lily Meredith." Tamsin stared at the photo for a long time. Lily had been pretty, strong-looking, the kind of face that suggested intelligence and independence. The kind of woman who'd own a remote cabin and pay taxes on it for 45 years. She brought the photo to Velda, who was sitting on the porch in the rocking chair. Tamsin had moved outside. The afternoon sun was warm, and Velda had wanted fresh air. "Found this in a drawer," Tamsin said, holding out the photograph. Velda took it with shaking hands. Her face went pale, then flushed. Her breathing changed, quick and shallow. For a moment, Tamsin thought she might need medical attention. But then Velda steadied, though tears were running down her cheeks. "You did know her," Tamsin said quietly. Velda nodded, unable to speak. "Who was she?" "Someone I knew a long time ago." Velda's voice was barely above a whisper. "How long ago?" "Before your father." "Before everything." She touched the photograph gently, tracing the image of Lily's face. "I was 19. She was 29. It was 1955. Tamsin sat down on the porch steps facing her mother. "What happened?" "We met in Billings. I was working at a diner, trying to save money to... I don't even remember what I wanted back then. To get somewhere else, I suppose. Anywhere else. Lily came in every morning for coffee. We got to talking. She was a teacher. She just bought this cabin, wanted a place to spend summers away from the city." Velda stopped, gathering herself. Tamsin waited, afraid to interrupt. "She invited me up here. Just for a weekend," she said. "To see the place. I'd never been to the mountains like this. Never seen anything so beautiful." Velda gestured at the lake, at the peaks beyond. "Oh, we spent 3 days here. And by the time I left, She couldn't finish. Didn't need to." Tamsin understood. "You loved her." "Yes. Simple, final, the truth after 40 years. I loved her more than I'd ever loved anything. More than I knew was possible. What happened? Life happened. 1955 happened. You have to understand what we had, what we were, that wasn't allowed. Wasn't safe. If people found out, Lily could lose her job. We could both end up in real trouble. The kind that doesn't go away." Tamsin thought about this. 955, small-town Montana. She'd read enough history to understand what her mother was saying. What it meant to be two women in love in a world that considered it criminal, immoral, sick. "We tried," Velda continued. "For 2 summers we met here, secret, just us. She'd take her teaching break, and I'd tell people I was working out of town. We'd have these weeks together where we could be ourselves. Really ourselves, no hiding, no pretending. And then I got scared, and she got patient, and I got more scared." Velda's hands twisted the photograph. "My family started pressuring me to marry. I was 21 by then, and in their eyes, I was becoming an old maid. There was a man, your father, who was interested. Nice man, solid. Everyone said what a good match it would be. So you married him. So I married him." Velda's voice broke. "I told Lily I couldn't see her anymore. Broke both our hearts. She asked me not to do it, asked me to run away with her instead. She had a teaching offer in Seattle. We could go there, start over where no one knew us, be together properly. But you said no. I said no. I was terrified of being found out, of being that kind of woman, of throwing away everything for something that seemed impossible. So I married your father, and Lily left for Seattle alone. And I never saw her again. The weight of it settled over them both. 65 years of grief and loss and roads not taken. Did you love my father?" Tamsin asked. "I cared for him, respected him, but no. I didn't love him the way a wife should love a husband. And he knew it. Deep down, he always knew something was wrong, even if he didn't know what. Is that why you left? When I was 22? Part of it." Velda wiped her eyes. "I spent 22 years living a lie, being someone I wasn't, pretending, and every day it got heavier until I thought it would crush me. One night I just broke. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't keep pretending I was happy in a life I'd never wanted. So I left. You could have told us. Me and Dad, we could have what?" Velda's voice was sharp now. "Understood, accepted. In 1975? In rural Montana? You think that would have gone well?" Tamsin didn't answer. She didn't know. Maybe Velda was right. Maybe the world hadn't been ready for that truth. I'm not making excuses, Velda said, more quietly. I hurt you both terribly. I was a coward. I made choices out of fear instead of love, and everyone paid the price. But that's what happened. That's the truth you wanted. Tamsin looked at the photograph in her mother's lap. At Lily's bright smile, frozen forever in 1956. Did you ever try to contact her after you left? No, I'd hurt her enough already. Seemed cruel to come back after all those years. She died in 1997, Tamsin said. I found her obituary. She owned this cabin until she died. Left instructions for her ashes to be scattered here. Velda closed her eyes. New tears ran down her face. She never married, Tamsin continued. Never had anyone else, from what the obituary said. Just students and friends in this cabin. She was waiting, Velda whispered. All those years. She was waiting for me to come back. Why did you agree to come here with me? Did you know this was her place? No, I swear I didn't. When you showed me the listing, I felt drawn to it, like something pulling me. I didn't recognize the property from the photos. It's changed so much. But maybe... She opened her eyes and looked at Tamsin. Maybe some part of me knew. Maybe I needed to come back here before I died. To face what I'd run from. Tamsin stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the lake. She thought about her own life, the ways she'd protected herself, the walls she'd built, how she'd spent 40 years making sure no one could leave her the way her mother had left. And all the while, her mother had been running from her own truth, building her own walls, making her own choices out of fear. They were more alike than Tamsin wanted to admit. Keep the photograph, Tamsin said finally. She'd want you to have it. Velda held it against her chest, nodding. That night they sat together in the cabin's main room. Neither spoke much, but something had shifted between them. A door opened just a crack, enough to let in light, enough to start the real conversation they'd been avoiding for 4 decades. 3 days passed in a rhythm that felt almost peaceful. Tamsin worked on repairs, while Velda rested or sat outside watching the lake. They talked more than they had in 40 years, though mostly about surface things. Safe things. Velda asked about the horses, and Tamsin told her about each one, their quirks, their progress, their owners. Velda talked about her years in Butte, the people she'd worked with, the quiet life she'd built. Neither mentioned Lily, not directly. But her presence was there in the cabin, in the photograph Velda kept beside her bed, in the way Velda sometimes stared at the lake with an expression Tamsin was beginning to recognize as grief. On the 4th morning, Tamsin was working on fixing a loose floorboard in the bedroom when she noticed something odd. One board didn't just lift, it revealed a gap beneath like a deliberate hiding place. She pried it up carefully. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from moisture, was a bundle of letters. They were tied together with faded blue string, the envelopes yellowed with age. Tamsin lifted them out and carried them to the main room where light was better. The top letter was addressed to Lily Meredith at a Seattle address. The return address just said V with a post office box in Billings. The postmark was 1955. Tamsin's hands shook slightly as she untied the string. She shouldn't read them. They were private, intimate, but they were also the key to understanding. She opened the first letter and read. The handwriting was young, hurried, full of emotion. The letter itself was a love letter. Simple as that. Someone named V, writing to Lily about missing her, about counting days until summer, about the cabin and the lake and the life they'd have together there. It was beautiful and heartbreaking in its honesty. Tamsin read through them chronologically. 23 letters spanning from 1955 to 1957. The correspondence told a story. 2 women deeply in love, planning a future, growing more desperate as the world pressed in on them. The tone shifted over time. Early letters were hopeful, later ones showed strain. The last letter from V was dated March 1957. It was short, devastating. My dearest Lily, I can't do this anymore. I'm so sorry. I'm marrying Robert Thorne in June. He's a good man, and he'll give me the kind of life that makes sense to everyone else. I know this breaks your heart. It breaks mine too, but I'm too afraid to be brave. I'm too afraid of what it would cost us both. Please don't hate me. Please don't wait for me. Go live your life and find happiness. You deserve so much more than I can give you. I will love you until I die. V.V. Velda. Velda Rourke before she married and became Velda Thorne. Among the letters was one more document, what looked like a draft of a response from Lily, written in pencil on different paper. It was gentler than Tamsin expected. I could never hate you. I understand fear, I've felt it too. But I also know love, and what we have is real and worth fighting for. If you marry him, I won't stand in your way. But I want you to know I'll be here, always, if you ever change your mind. If you ever find the courage, I'll be here waiting. The cabin will always be ours, even if you never come back. Tamsin sat back, the letters in her lap. She looked at her mother, who'd woken from her nap and was watching her with eyes that already knew. You found them, Velda said. Yes, I wondered if they were still here. Lily told me once she'd kept everything I wrote. Said she couldn't bear to throw them away. Tamsin held up the letters. These are yours. You wrote these? I did. I was young and stupid, and so in love I could barely breathe. Velda's voice was steady now, like she'd moved past shame into simple fact. She wrote back. Every time. Her letters were beautiful, kind. Even when I hurt her, she was kind. V stood for Velda. Yes, I didn't put my full name. Too risky. If anyone found the letters, if anyone knew, she didn't finish. Didn't need to. Tamsin read through more of them. The intimacy was striking. The way they wrote about each other, about their time together, about dreams of a shared future. This was love. Real deep committed love. The kind most people spent their whole lives searching for. You threw this away, Tamsin said. Not accusing, just observing. I did. Why? Really, why? I understand about 1957, about the world then. But after Dad died? You could have what? Velda's voice was tired. She was in Seattle. I was in Montana. 40 years had passed. I'd made my choice and lived with it. You don't just go back after that long. You don't get to say I was wrong, take me back. That's not how life works. But she loved you. The whole time. She never married anyone else. She kept this cabin, kept these letters, waited, and I didn't know that. Velda's voice broke. By the time I might have been brave enough to reach out, she was already gone. I found out about her death 3 years after it happened. Saw an old newspaper by chance in a library, and by then it was too late for anything except regret. Tamsin thought about Lily's obituary. 1997. Her father had died in 2015, 18 years between. Velda had been free, and Lily had been alive for 18 years. But neither had reached out. Pride, Velda said, reading Tamsin's thoughts. And shame. And fear that she'd tell me to go away. That she'd found happiness without me, and didn't want me anymore. All the reasons cowards tell themselves. You're not a coward. Yes, I am. I've been a coward my whole life. Made every choice from fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of being myself. And look what it cost me. A lifetime with the woman I loved. A relationship with my daughter. A husband who deserved better than half a heart. Velda wiped her eyes. I'm dying, Tamsin. And I'm dying with more regrets than years left to count them. Tamsin gathered the letters carefully and brought them to her mother. She forgave you. In her response, she forgave you before you even asked. Velda took the letters and held them like they might break. That was always who she was. Better than me in every way. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the lake reflected afternoon clouds, the water perfectly still. When I brought you here, Tamsin said finally, I wanted answers about why you left. Why you weren't the mother I needed. But now you understand it was never about you. It was about me. About living a lie for so long I forgot what truth felt like. Yes, does that help? Knowing that, Tamsin considered. I don't know yet. But it's better than not knowing. Velda nodded. That's fair. That evening, Tamsin called Jessie to check on the ranch. Everything was fine, running smoothly. After she hung up, she sat on the porch and thought about her own life. The ways she'd protected herself. Never letting anyone close enough to hurt her. Never taking risks with her heart. She'd been so angry at her mother for leaving, for choosing silence over connection. But in her own way, hadn't she done the same thing? Built a life so guarded that nothing could get in, but nothing could grow there either. Inside, she could hear Velda coughing. The sound was getting worse, wetter. Time was running out, but at least now, in this cabin full of ghosts and old love letters, they were finally telling the truth. The next morning, while searching through the same hiding place where she'd found the letters, Tamsin discovered something else. A small silver compass on a delicate chain. She turned it over in her palm. On the back was an engraving, not words but coordinates. She recognized them as latitude and longitude. She showed it to Velda, who was having a good morning despite worsening symptoms. Velda's face lit up when she saw it. "She gave me this," Velda said, taking it carefully. The summer of 56. Said as long as I had it, I'd always be able to find my way back to her. What are the coordinates? A place by the lake. Our place, where we carved our initials in a tree like foolish kids. Velda smiled at the memory. We thought we were so clever. Like no one would ever figure out what the initials meant. Can you still get there? Velda looked out the window at the lake, then back at Tamsin. Her expression was hopeful and heartbroken at once. I don't know. I'm not sure I can walk that far anymore. Then I'll help you. An hour later, they made their way slowly down to the lake shore, Tamsin supporting most of Velda's weight. Her mother weighed almost nothing now, her body consuming itself. Each step took effort, each breath was labored, but Velda was determined. They followed the shoreline around a gentle bend. The coordinates led them to a massive pine tree, ancient and solid, its roots spreading into the water. And there, about chest height on the trunk, weathered but still visible, Etel M. Piplas, VR, 1956. Velda reached out and touched the carved letters. Her fingers traced each line. Lily did it, with a pocket knife she carried. Took her half an hour. I kept watch, terrified someone would come along and see us. It's still here. After all these years, trees remember, Velda said softly. Even when people forget, they sat together on a flat rock near the tree. The lake stretched out before them, impossibly blue, surrounded by peaks still holding snow. It was the kind of view that made you feel both significant and small, part of something ancient and ongoing. Tell me about her, Tamsin said. Not the sad parts, the good parts. Velda's face softened with memory. She had this laugh, this deep, real laugh that came from her belly. Made everyone around her smile. She was smart. Not just book smart, though, she was that too. Smart about people. About life. She could see through pretense in a second. What did you do together? Here, I mean. Simple things. Walked, talked. She taught me to identify birds by their calls. We'd swim in the lake even though it was freezing. Sit on the porch at night and watch the stars. Velda paused, remembering. She'd read to me sometimes. Poetry mostly. She loved poetry. Mary Oliver, Walt Whitman. She said poetry was for people brave enough to feel things deeply. She sounds wonderful. She was. She was everything good that I was afraid to be. Honest, brave, true to herself no matter what it cost. And I, Velda's voice caught. I loved her for it and hated myself for not being able to match it. Tamsin thought about that. About loving someone and simultaneously feeling diminished by them. Not because they made you small, but because they showed you how small you'd made yourself. I did the same thing, Tamsin said. After you left, Velda looked at her. I built walls so high nothing could climb them. Kept everyone at arm's length. Never dated seriously. Never let anyone close. Told myself it was about being independent, about not needing anyone. But really, I was just terrified of being hurt the way Dad was hurt. The way you must have hurt. I'm sorry, Velda said. I'm so sorry I taught you that fear. You didn't mean to. Doesn't matter. I still did it. Showed you that love meant pain and leaving. That was my legacy to you. They sat quietly for a while. A pair of ducks landed on the water, sending ripples across the surface. The afternoon sun felt warm on Tamsin's shoulders. Can I ask you something? Tamsin said finally. Anything. If you could go back, knowing everything you know now, would you do it differently? Would you choose her? Velda was quiet for so long, Tamsin thought she wouldn't answer. Then yes, God help me, yes. I would choose love over safety. I would choose truth over comfort. Even knowing how much it would cost. even knowing the world would push back, yes. Because living a lie killed something in me. Every day, a little more died, until there wasn't much left worth saving. But you had me. And Dad, a family. That wasn't nothing. No, it wasn't nothing. And I don't regret you, Tamsin. Never you. But I regret not being the mother you deserved, because I was too busy being someone I wasn't. I regret wasting decades being half alive instead of fully myself. Velda turned to face her daughter. You asked if I'd choose differently. The answer is yes. Not because what I chose was worthless, but because what I gave up was irreplaceable. Tamsin felt something shift in her chest. Understanding, maybe, or permission. I'm 62 years old and I've never been in love. Not really. Not the way you're describing. That's not too late to change, isn't it? No. Velda gripped Tamsin's hand with surprising strength. Listen to me. You're 62. If you're fortunate, you might have 20 or 30 good years left. Don't waste them protecting yourself from something that might never happen. Don't spend them alone, because alone feels safer. Let someone in. Let yourself feel things, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. Because that's living, and anything else is just waiting to die. The words hung between them. Tamsin thought about the ranch, about her careful, controlled life. About Doc Henshaw, who'd been coming around for 15 years with coffee and quiet company. About how she'd never once considered that his visits might be about more than veterinary care. About how she'd never let herself consider it, because considering meant risking. I hear you, Tamsin said. Do you? Or are you just saying that to make a dying woman feel better? Tamsin smiled despite herself. Both, maybe. Fair enough. Velda leaned back against Tamsin's shoulder, exhausted from the walk and the conversation. We should head back. I'm tired. They made their way back to the cabin slowly. Velda needed to rest twice along the short path. By the time they reached the porch, she was gray with fatigue. Tamsin helped her inside and to bed. Thank you, Velda whispered, for taking me there. You're welcome. I couldn't have asked for it. Couldn't have said I wanted to see the tree one more time. But you knew. Somehow you knew. Tamsin adjusted the blankets around her mother. Maybe I'm learning to listen to what's not said. That's a good skill. Took me 70 years to learn it. That evening, after Velda fell asleep, Tamsin sat on the porch wearing the compass necklace. Velda had given it to her, saying she didn't need it anymore. She'd found her way back to where she needed to be. Tamsin opened the compass and watched the needle settle. Always pointing north. Always true, she thought about truth, about how it had taken 40 years and a condemned cabin and a dying mother for them to finally find it between them. But they had found it. And that was something. Inside, Velda coughed, deep and rattling. The sound was getting worse. Time was running short, but for the first time in 40 years, they weren't running from each other. They were running toward something, toward understanding, toward forgiveness. Toward whatever peace two women could make with the past before one of them disappeared into it forever. That night, Tamsin couldn't sleep. Something about the whole situation kept nagging at her. The cabin, Lily's death in 1997, the property being abandoned and reclaimed by the county. The timeline didn't quite add up. She sat at the small table with her laptop, using the weak internet signal to dig deeper. She started with Lily's obituary again, reading more carefully this time. Then she searched property records for the county, looking for the history of this specific parcel. What she found made her sit back in her chair, heart-pounding. The cabin had been left to someone in Lily's will. The county records showed it clearly. In 1997, upon Lily Jane Meredith's death, ownership had transferred to Velda Rourke, not Velda Thorne. Velda Rourke. Her maiden name Tamsin kept reading. Legal notices had been sent to an address in Billings, then later to Butte, trying to reach Velda Rourke about the inheritance. No response. Property taxes went unpaid. After years of legal process, the county finally reclaimed it in 2003 for back taxes and fees. The amount owed? $237. Tamsin's hands were shaking. She pulled up the listing she'd responded to. The county auction. $200 to cover administrative fees and back taxes. It hadn't been a sale. It had been reclaiming what should have been Velda's all along. She looked over at her mother, sleeping in the other room. Velda had known, had to have known. She'd owned this cabin for 28 years and never claimed it. Let it deteriorate into condemnation. Let it nearly fall into the lake rather than come back to it. And then let Tamsin believe she was buying it for $200 of her last money. Tamsin stood up and walked outside onto the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky in ways city dwellers never saw. She was furious and heartbroken and confused all at once. In the morning, she waited until Velda woke and had her medication before confronting her. She laid the printed property records and legal notices on the bed. "You've owned this cabin since 1997, Tamsin said. Her voice was controlled, but barely. Velda looked at the papers and closed her eyes. "Yes, Lily left it to you. In her will. Using your maiden name. Yes, you got legal notices. They tried to reach you for years. I moved around. Some of them probably never found me. But yes, I knew. Eventually I knew. And you did nothing. Let it sit here. Let the county take it back for unpaid taxes. Yes, Tamsin's control broke. Why? Why would you do that? She left you this place. This beautiful place that meant everything to both of you, and you just abandoned it like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing." Velda's voice was quiet but firm. "It was everything. That's why I couldn't come back to it. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it?" Velda struggled to sit up. Tamsin helped her despite her anger. "She left me this cabin because she loved me. Because she never stopped loving me, even though I broke her heart and married someone else and never reached out for 40 years. She left it to me as a gift, as forgiveness I didn't deserve. So you let it rot?" "I let myself rot." Velda's eyes were fierce now despite her frailty. "I got the first notice in 1999. Took me a year to even understand what it meant. When I finally did, when I realized Lily had left this place to me, I couldn't breathe. The guilt almost killed me. She died 2 years earlier, and I never knew. She'd loved me enough to give me this place, and I'd loved her so little I hadn't even known she was gone." Tamsin sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "I thought about coming here," Velda continued. "1,000 times I thought about it. Got in the car once, drove halfway before turning back. Because coming here meant facing what I'd thrown away, what I'd been too afraid to choose, and I couldn't do it. So I let the taxes go unpaid. Let the county take it back. Let it become someone else's problem. Until I found it. Until you found it." Velda reached for Tamsin's hand. "And I don't know if I should tell you this, but I'm dying, and there's no point in more lies. When you showed me that listing, when you said you'd spent your last $200 on a condemned cabin by Alpine Lake, I knew. Right then, I knew it was Lily's place. Our place. But I said I didn't recognize it. Another lie. I did recognize it. Maybe not from the photos. It looks so different now, but the description, the location, the way you described the lake. I knew." Tamsin pulled her hand away. "You let me think I was doing something for you. Making this grand gesture. Spending money I couldn't afford to lose. Yes. Why? Because I needed you to choose this." Velda's voice broke. "I needed someone to choose love and connection instead of fear and isolation. Even if I couldn't do it myself. And I needed—" She stopped, gathering herself. "I needed you to bring me back here. I couldn't come alone. Couldn't face it alone. But with you, maybe we could both face what we'd been running from." Tamsin stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lake was perfectly still. The same lake Lily and Velda had swum in 60 years ago. The same view they'd loved together. "This whole thing," Tamsin said slowly. "Coming here, the cabin, the discovery of the letters, you orchestrated all of it." "Not exactly. I didn't hide those letters there. I didn't know what you'd find. But yes, I knew what this place was. And I knew if we came here, the truth would come out. One way or another. You manipulated me, yes. No excuses. No softening. Just the truth." Tamsin didn't know whether to scream or cry. She'd been so angry at her mother for 40 years. For leaving, for the silence, for all the damage that silence had caused. And now here was her mother, at the very end of her life, still making choices for both of them. still controlling the narrative. But then, wasn't that exactly what Tamsin had done too? Making the choice to bring Velda here without really consulting her? Deciding they needed this time together? They were both trying to control something that couldn't be controlled. Time, truth, the past. "I spent my last $200, Tamsin said. "I know. I'm sorry. The ranch is barely breaking even. That money mattered. I know, but you let me spend it anyway." "I did. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about you choosing to be here. Not out of duty or obligation, but because you wanted answers. Wanted connection. Wanted something. Anything besides the isolation you'd built around yourself." Tamsin turned from the window. "You had no right. You're absolutely correct. I had no right. I've had no right to be part of your life for 40 years. But I'm dying, Tamsin. And I needed to know my daughter one more time before I went. To tell her the truth. To ask for forgiveness even if I don't deserve it. To see if maybe, just maybe, we could find some kind of peace together. By lying to me. By bringing us both to the one place where lies wouldn't hold. Where the truth was buried in the floorboards and carved in the trees and written in letters tied with string. Yes." Tamsin sat down again. Her anger was still there, but underneath it something else. Understanding, maybe, or exhaustion. They'd both been carrying these lies and secrets for so long. Maybe it took manipulation to finally crack them open. "This place is yours," Tamsin said. "Legally, it's been yours for 28 years. The county auction was just clearing back taxes. Then it's yours now. I transfer it to you. Whatever paperwork needs signing, I'll sign. I won't live long enough for it to matter to me. But maybe you can do something with it. Maybe you can make it mean something again. Like what? I don't know. Keep it. Fix it up properly. Come here when the ranch gets too small. Or sell it and use the money for feed bills. I don't care. Just don't let it rot the way I did. Don't let fear turn something beautiful into something condemned." Tamsin looked around the cabin. At the repairs she'd made. At the light coming through clean windows. At the photograph of young Lily on the table beside Velda's bed. "I'm still angry at you," she said. "I know, but I understand why you did it. That's more than I deserve." Probably. They sat together in the quiet cabin while, outside, the lake reflected morning clouds. Two women, mother and daughter, finally telling the truth after 40 years of silence. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't neat, but it was real. And maybe that was enough. That afternoon, Velda collapsed. Tamsin had been outside repairing the porch railing when she heard the crash. She ran inside to find her mother on the floor beside the bed, too weak to stand. The hospice nurse, Karen, came within the hour. Her examination was thorough, but her expression said everything before she spoke. "Days," she said quietly to Tamsin in the kitchen. "Not weeks. Her body's shutting down faster than we expected. The cancer is everywhere now. I'm increasing her morphine to keep her comfortable, but I understand. Do you want to move her back to the facility? We can arrange transport." "No, she wants to be here." "I want her here." Karen nodded and squeezed Tamsin's shoulder. "I'll check in tomorrow morning. Call me any time if you need me, day or night." After Karen left, Tamsin sat beside Velda's bed. Her mother drifted in and out of consciousness, the morphine making her fuzzy at the edges. During her lucid moments, she seemed almost peaceful. "I'm glad I came back," Velda whispered. "To this place. Me too. Are you still angry?" "Yes, but it's smaller now. The anger, like it's making room for other things." "Good. Don't let anger eat your life the way regret ate mine." That evening, unable to sleep and needing to do something with her hands, Tamsin decided to explore the attic more thoroughly. She'd only glanced up there before, but now she climbed the pull-down stairs with a lantern and looked around properly. The space was small but dry. Boxes sat in corners covered in dust. Tamsin opened them one by one. Most contained typical cabin things, old blankets, rusty tools, a camping stove from decades ago. But one box was different. It was sealed with tape that had yellowed but held. She opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were personal items. A wooden jewelry box, some watercolor paintings, and at the bottom, a leather journal. Tamsin carried the journal down to the main room and sat by the lantern light. The first page was inscribed Lily Jane Meredith, 1956. She opened it and began to read. The entries weren't daily. They were sporadic, written when Lily had things she needed to process. But together, they told the story of a woman deeply in love with someone she couldn't have. The early entries from 1956 were full of joy, describing Velda's visits, their time together at the cabin, plans for the future. Then came 1957. The tone changed. Lily wrote about Velda's growing fear, the pressure she was under from family, the way their time together became strained. And finally, the entry after receiving Velda's letter about the marriage. She's choosing safety over truth. I understand it even as it breaks my heart. The world is not kind to people like us. She's trying to survive, and I cannot fault her for that. I will not fault her for that. I love her enough to let her go. But I will not pretend it doesn't hurt. I will not pretend I won't spend the rest of my life wondering what if, Tamsin read on. Through decades of entries, fewer and further between, but consistent. Lily never married. She dated occasionally, but nothing serious. Her life revolved around teaching, friends, community work. And this cabin, she came every summer, sometimes with friends, but often alone. There were entries about considering selling it, but never following through. Entries about tracking Velda's life from afar, learning about her husband's death, wondering if she should reach out, ultimately deciding against it. A 1995 entry read, "I saw her picture in a newspaper from Butte. She's still beautiful. Still has those eyes that could see right through me." I wanted to write to her. Wanted to drive to Butte and knock on her door and ask if maybe, after all these years, we could try again. But I'm 65 years old. She's 60. We're different people now. Maybe the love we had only existed in that moment in our youth. In trying to resurrect it would just disappoint us both. The final entries, written in the months before Lily died, were about the cabin and what to do with it. She'd decided to leave it to Velda in her will. Not because she expected anything from it, but because it had been theirs and it should return to Velda if she ever wanted it. "Maybe she'll come here one day," Lily wrote. "Maybe she'll stand on this porch and remember what we had. Maybe she'll know I never stopped loving her, never stopped hoping. That's all I can give her now. This place and the hope that she'll understand I forgave her long before there was anything to forgive. We were young. The world was cruel. She did what she had to do. I just wish it could have been different." The last entry was dated October 1997, a month before Lily died. "I'm told I don't have long. Cancer. It's everywhere and there's nothing to be done. I find I'm not afraid of dying. I've had a good life. Students who became friends. Work that mattered. Summers in this beautiful place. Love, even if I only got to keep it for 2 summers, it was real and it was mine. If there's anything after this, I'll wait for her there too. Just in case she ever finds the courage to come home." Tamsin closed the journal, with tears running down her face. She looked over at Velda, sleeping fitfully in the morphine haze. Her mother had spent 40 years running from this love. And Lily had spent 40 years waiting, hoping, forgiving. Neither of them had been wrong exactly. Just human, just afraid, just trying to survive in a world that didn't make room for what they were. In the morning, Velda woke more alert than she'd been in days. Tamsin showed her the journal. "I read it," Tamsin said. "All of it." Lily's words, her side of the story. Velda held the journal against her chest. "Will you read some to me?" My eyes, they're not good anymore, so Tamsin read. She read the entries about their summers together. The ones about Lily's heartbreak and understanding. The final entries about forgiveness and waiting. When she finished, they both sat quietly. Velda's face was wet with tears. "She never gave up on me," Velda whispered. "No, she never did. I didn't deserve that. Maybe not. But she loved you anyway. That's what love is. It doesn't wait for deserving." Velda was quiet for a long time. "Then I want you to know something. About leaving you and your father. It wasn't because I didn't love you. You were the one good thing in that life. But every time I looked at you, I saw the lie I was living, the person I was pretending to be. And I couldn't keep pretending and watch you grow up learning to be false too. So I left. I thought maybe without me there, you could be more real than I'd ever been. Did it work? I don't know, did it? Tamsin thought about her life, the walls she'd built, the isolation she'd chosen. I became real in some ways. I worked with horses and land and honest things. But in other ways, in the ways that matter most, I think I became just as false as you were. Just in a different direction. We both got it wrong then, maybe, but we're here now. That's something? Yes, that's something. Doc Henshaw came by that evening, bringing supplies and his steady presence. He examined Velda gently and spoke to her with kindness. After he sat with Tamsin on the porch, "She's close," he said. "You know that." "I know. Are you ready?" "No, but I don't think anyone ever is." "Fair point." He was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, what you're doing here, giving her this time, this place, it's good. However you got here, whatever complicated path led to it, this is good. Thank you. And after," he paused, "after you'll have some decisions to make. About the ranch, about your life, about what comes next. If you need someone to talk things through with, I'm available. Have been for a while now, if you'd ever noticed." Tamsin looked at him. Really looked. Saw the kindness in his weathered face, the patience in his eyes. The way he'd been showing up for 15 years with coffee and conversation, and never asking for anything in return. "I'm noticing now," she said quietly. He smiled. "Good, that's a start." After he left, Tamsin stood on the porch and looked at the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water orange and gold. Inside, her mother was dying. Outside, the world kept turning. And somewhere in between, Tamsin felt something shift. A door opening. A wall coming down. The beginning of letting go. Not of love, but of fear. She wore Lily's compass around her neck. In her pocket was the deed to this property that was legally hers, had been for years, would remain so after Velda was gone. In the cabin behind her was a dying woman who'd finally come home to truth, and in front of her was a lake reflecting light, and mountains holding steady, and a future that was suddenly less certain, but somehow more hopeful than anything she'd imagined. Time was running out. But for the first time in 40 years, Tamsin Rourke wasn't running with it. She was standing still, present, real, ready for whatever came next. Doc Henshaw came back the next day, and this time he brought Jessie with him. The young woman had insisted on coming when she heard how close things were. She carried fresh flowers from the ranch, wildflowers she'd picked from the meadow behind the barn. "Thought she might like something pretty to look at," Jessie said, arranging them in a mason jar by Velda's bedside. Velda was awake, but barely. The morphine kept her floating between consciousness and dreams. But she smiled when she saw the flowers, reaching out with trembling fingers to touch a petal. "Beautiful," she whispered. Doc checked her vital signs with practiced efficiency. Afterward, he sat beside the bed and talked to Velda about simple things. The weather, the mountains, the quality of light on the lake. Velda listened, her eyes, tracking his face, grateful for the distraction from pain. Jessie sat on the porch with Tamsin, both women quiet. After a while, Jessie spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you glad?" "That you brought her here, I mean. That you got this time." Tamsin considered. "Yes, not in a simple way. It's been hard. Harder than I expected. But yes, I'm glad. What did you learn? About her, I mean. About why she left." "Too much to explain easily. But the short version, she was living a lie. Pretending to be someone she wasn't. And it broke something in her. She left to survive. And you forgive her?" "I'm working on it. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's more like a door you choose to keep opening, even when it wants to swing shut." Jessie nodded thoughtfully. "My mom left when I was little. Different reasons, but I get the anger, the wondering. I never got to ask her why. I'm sorry. It's okay. Or it will be. Hearing your story, it helps. Knowing that sometimes people leave because they're broken, not because we weren't worth staying for." Tamsin reached over and squeezed Jessie's hand. "You were worth staying for. Don't ever doubt that." Inside, Doc was telling Velda about the ranch, about the horses Tamsin trained, about the reputation she'd built. Velda listened with tears streaming down her face. "She's good at what she does," Doc said. Best horse trainer in 3 counties, patient fair, never gives up on an animal no matter how damaged they are when they arrive. She sees the good in them and works to bring it out. She got that from her father, Velda said. Maybe, but I think she got some things from you too, her strength, her stubbornness, her ability to survive anything. Velda smiled weakly. Those might not be compliments. They are where I'm from. That evening, after Doc and Jessie left, Velda asked Tamsin to bring her something from the boxes in the attic. Tamsin climbed up and found what her mother described, a wooden box, hand-carved, surprisingly heavy. She brought it down and opened it at Velda's direction. Inside was a simple gold ring and a letter, the paper brittle with age. Tamsin read the letter aloud. It was from Lily, dated 1957, never sent. She'd written about making the box in a woodshop class, carving their initials inside the lid. About buying the ring with money saved from teaching. About wanting to propose, wanting to ask Velda to run. Away with her to Seattle, where they could build a life together. But she'd never sent it, never asked. The moment had passed, and Velda had married someone else, and the letter had stayed in this box for 68 years. She was going to ask me to marry her, Velda said. Her voice was full of wonder and grief. In 1957, when that was impossible, when it was criminal, she was going to ask anyway. What would you have said? Yes. No hesitation. God help me, I would have said yes. We would have lost everything, jobs, family, safety. But I would have said yes. Tamsin held up the ring. Want to wear it now? Velda nodded. Tamsin slipped it onto her mother's finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting all this time. I'm wearing Lily's ring, Velda said, staring at it. 68 years late, but I'm wearing it. Better late than never. Is it, though? Is it better to get it at the end, when there's no time left to do anything with it? Tamsin thought about that. Yes. Because now you know. You know she wanted forever with you. You know she never stopped hoping. That's worth knowing, even at the end. Velda closed her eyes, the ring catching lamplight. Thank you for finding these things, for reading them to me, for everything. You're welcome. I don't deserve you. Maybe not, but you have me anyway. That night, they talked until Velda couldn't stay awake anymore. They talked about the past, about regrets, about things that couldn't be changed, but could maybe be understood. And in the morning, when dawn came soft and golden through the cabin windows, they were still together. Mother and daughter, finally after 40 years, finally understanding each other, finally home. The final days came slowly, and then all at once, Velda slept more than she was awake now. Her breathing was labored, her body failing in stages. Karen, the hospice nurse, came daily, adjusting medications, making sure Velda was comfortable. There was nothing more to do but wait and bear witness. On what would be the last full day, Velda woke surprisingly alert. She asked Tamsin to help her to the porch. It took time and effort, but they made it, settling Velda in the rocking chair with blankets around her. The morning was clear and still. The lake reflected the sky perfectly, doubling the mountains. A pair of eagles circled overhead, riding thermals. I want to do something, Velda said. One more thing before I can't anymore. What's that? Walk to the lake. Collect a stone, like we used to do with your father when you were small. Remember? Tamsin did remember. Family walks when she was maybe 5 or 6, before things fell apart. Her father would carry her on his shoulders, and her mother would collect smooth stones from streams. She'd forgotten that until this moment, I remember. Let's do it again. One last time, but from here to the lake. You and me. So they did. Tamsin supported almost all her mother's weight as they made their slow way down to the shore. It took 15 minutes to cover a distance that should have taken 2. Velda had to stop 3 times to catch her breath, her face grey with effort, but they made it. At the water's edge, Velda bent slowly and chose a smooth grey stone about the size of her palm. She held it up to the light, studying it. Perfect, she said. They had a mason jar on the porch now, filling with stones from their brief daily walks, each stone representing another day together, another conversation, Another piece of truth shared. Velda added this one when they returned to the porch. The jar was almost full. Scatter them by the tree when I'm gone, Velda said. By the carved tree, so I can stay with Lily. I will. Promise? I promise. They sat together through the afternoon. Velda dozed off and on. When she was awake, they talked about simple things. The horses, the ranch, plans for repairs once Tamsin got back. But underneath, they were saying goodbye, and they both knew it. As evening approached, Velda asked Tamsin to read from Lily's journal again. Tamsin chose entries about their summers together, about joy and love and hope. Velda listened with closed eyes, smiling sometimes, crying sometimes. When Tamsin finished reading, Velda spoke. I need to say something. While I still can, I'm listening. Thank you for bringing me here, for giving me this time, for not giving up on me, even though I gave up on you. You didn't give up on me. I did, when I left. But you didn't give up on me. You came back. You found this place. You brought me home even though I didn't deserve it. Velda opened her eyes and looked directly at Tamsin. You're a better person than I ever was, stronger, braver, more real. I learned from your mistakes. Good, that's what mistakes are. For learning, growing, doing. Better. Velda reached for Tamsin's hand. Promise me something. Anything. Don't waste your life being afraid. Don't spend the next 40 years protecting yourself from hurt. Let people in. Let yourself love. Even if it's scary. Especially if it's scary. I'll try. No, promise. I promise, Velda smiled. Good, now help me to bed. I'm tired. Tamsin helped her mother settle in for the night. Made sure she was comfortable, that her medication was within reach, that water was close by. She sat beside the bed as Velda's breathing evened into sleep. Around midnight, Velda woke one more time. She seemed almost surprised to still be there. Tamsin, I'm here. I love you. I always loved you, even when I was gone, especially then. I know. I love you too, and I'm sorry. For all of it. For leaving. For the silence. For not being the mother you deserved. I forgive you. Velda's face relaxed with something like peace. Thank you. Rest now. Will you stay? I don't want to be alone. I'll stay. I'm not going anywhere. Velda took Tamsin's hand and held it, even in sleep. The ring Lily had bought for her 68 years ago caught the moonlight through the window. Outside, the lake held the reflection of stars. Hours passed. Tamsin watched her mother's breathing, listened to the quiet sounds of the cabin settling around them. She thought about the past few weeks, about letters and secrets and truths finally told, about love that endured across decades despite being denied, about forgiveness and how it wasn't a single act, but a practice. A choice made over and over. Just before dawn, Velda's breathing changed, became slower, shallower. Tamsin held her hand tighter. I'm here, she whispered. You're not alone. I'm right here, and in the softest grey light before sunrise, with her daughter holding her hand in the cabin she'd once shared with her only love. Velda Rourke took her last breath. The silence that followed was different from all the silences before it. This one wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of peace, of love, finally spoken after years of being held back. Tamsin sat with her mother as the sun rose over the mountains, turning the lake to gold, and she knew with absolute certainty that they'd both finally found their way home. The memorial service was small and private, held by the lake under clear September skies. Doc Henshaw came, and Jessie and Karen, the hospice nurse who'd cared for Velda in those final weeks. A few others from town who'd heard the story and felt moved to attend. Tamsin stood by the carved tree, LM plus VR 1956, and scattered her mother's ashes as promised. Then she scattered the stones from the mason jar, each one falling into the water with a soft splash. 37 stones for 37 days together. Not nearly enough, but more than they'd had in 40 years. She read from Lily's journal, the passage about love, enduring and forgiveness, and meeting again in another life. Doc said a few words about second chances and the courage it takes to tell the truth. Jessie placed wildflowers on the water's surface, watching them float away toward the center of the lake. And then it was done. Velda was gone, returned to the place she'd loved and lost and found again at the very end. In the weeks that followed, Tamsin stayed at the cabin. She called Jessie daily about the ranch, made sure everything was running smoothly. But she needed this time, needed to process, needed to figure out what came next. She spent her days working on repairs. The cabin had been condemned for good reason. There was genuine work to be done. But the structure was sound beneath the decay. With effort and care, it could be restored. She patched the roof properly, replaced broken windows, stripped and refinished the warped floors until they were level and solid. She hired someone to fix the well pump, restoring running water, updated the electrical system so it was safe and functional. The physical work helped, gave her hands something to do while her mind processed everything that had happened. Her mother's secrets, Lily's enduring love, the ways fear had shaped both their lives. Doc Henshaw stopped by often, always with some excuse. Needed to check on her. Brought supplies, wanted to see how the repairs were going. They'd sit on the porch in the evenings and talk. Really talk about her father and her childhood and the years since. About his own life, his work, his quiet affection that had been there all along if she'd only noticed. "I'm 62 years old," Tamsin said one evening. "Isn't it too late to start something new?" "Well, I'm 73, so if it's too late for you, I'm really in trouble," he smiled. "But I don't think it is. Too late, I mean. I think we get to choose, right up until we don't anymore. Your mother taught you that. She did, didn't she? So what are you choosing?" Tamsin looked out at the lake, at the mountains holding steady in the evening light. "I'm choosing to stay open, to let people in. To stop protecting myself from hurt because that protection was costing me everything worth having. That's a good choice. We'll see." During the renovation, Tamsin found more of Lily's belongings. Watercolor paintings that had been stored in protective cases in the attic. They were beautiful, landscapes of the lake, studies of wildflowers, portraits of the mountains in different seasons. She had them framed and hung throughout the cabin. She also found Lily's teaching certificate from 1951, letters from former students thanking her for changing their lives, photographs of school plays and field trips and classroom celebrations, evidence of a life well lived, even if it wasn't the life Lily had hoped for. One afternoon, Tamsin sat down and wrote it all out. The whole story. Velda and Lily's love affair in the 1950s, the choices made from fear, the decades of regret, the final reconciliation in a cabin by an alpine lake. She wasn't sure what she'd do with the writing. Maybe nothing. But it felt important to preserve it. To honor two women who'd loved each other when the world said they couldn't, who'd paid the price for that love in different ways. As the cabin restoration neared completion, Tamsin made a decision. She'd keep it, use it as a second home, spending summers here and winters at the ranch. She'd need help managing both places, which meant expanding, hiring more people. Taking on more horses, it meant risk. It meant growth. It meant letting go of the small, safe life she'd built. But her mother had been right. Playing it safe had cost her 40 years. She wasn't going to waste whatever time she had left. On a cool October morning, 3 months after Velda's death, Tamsin hung a new sign by the cabin door. She'd made it herself from pine, carved and sanded smooth. It read, "Lily and Velda's Place, 1956-2025, claiming the space for the love it had sheltered, honoring both women, making sure their story wasn't forgotten." She stood back and looked at the cabin. It bore little resemblance to the condemned structure she'd first seen. The porch was solid, the windows gleamed, the roof sat straight. Inside, light poured through clean glass onto refinished floors. The fireplace worked perfectly. The kitchen was functional and welcoming. It was beautiful. Just as beautiful as it must have been in 1956, when Lily and Velda spent their secret summers here. Tamsin wore the compass necklace always now. And sometimes, when the light hit the lake just right, she could almost see them. Two young women who loved each other when love like theirs was forbidden, who carved their initials in a tree and dreamed of impossible futures. They'd never gotten that future, but they'd had this place. And now, because of them, Tamsin had learned something essential, that walls built for protection become prisons. That silence kills more surely than truth. That love, even love that hurts, even love that's lost, is always worth it. Her phone rang. Doc Henshaw asking if she wanted company for dinner. She smiled and said yes. Then she walked down to the lake and stood by the tree with the carved initials. Touched them gently, the way her mother had touched them in those final days. "I'm going to be okay," she said to the air, to the water, to whatever of them remained. "We're all going to be okay." And there, in the high country of Montana, with the autumn sun warm on her shoulders and her whole life still ahead of her, Tamsin Rourke finally believed it. The cabin stood behind her, restored and welcoming. The lake stretched before her, holding light. And somewhere beyond the visible world, she imagined two women finally together, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. Home at last.